Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's the Hire and Fire podcast show brought to you by Pirate Consulting. I'm Jeremy Miller, your host, and my co-host is Amanda Anderson. Hello, Double A.
Hey.
What's happening?
Not much. Trying to stay warm.
Hell yeah.
Ugh.
We're in the frickin' frozen tundra here up in Minnesota. So if you're somewhere warmer, lucky.
Right.
It's probably in the 13-degree range, and that's kind of above normal presently, which is a little weird. We are going to continue our series today on harassment because that's fun. Very positive, uplifting, New Year type discussion. The previous show, which I highly recommend, we talked all about sexual harassment. So we're basically breaking down in 3 or 4 shows sex, religion, and politics in the workplace. So the first show is devoted to sexual harassment. Today is going to be a lot about religion, and we already have some follow-up notes in regards to what we need to cover again. So questions that have come up. So that'll be cool. Eventually we'll get to that show. But today is all about religion.
Yeah,
So get your prayer shawls and rosaries ready because that's what we're doing today.
This is essentially a 4-part mini-series.
That it is.
Because the 4th one will cover all the stuff we weren't quite sure of in the first 3.
That it is. Now, I mean, it's the Hire and Fire show, right? So we're trying to come at this stuff from a workplace perspective.
Yeah.
So that's basically our kind of angle per se. But a lot of this has to do with just, religious-based discrimination in general. And actually, a little teaser, I found some cool differentiators between different types of employers, right? Like private employers, governments, federal governments, and there's even an employment agencies thing in here too, which is interesting. So we'll get there. But otherwise, if you want to talk about people getting arrested or being very weird or awkward conversations and moments in the workplace, you have found the right spot. So, no news and notes today. We're just going to jump right in and get the discussion going and see where we go from there. So religious discrimination. I did a lot of research specifically focused on the EEOC, so the Equal Opportunity essentially division, for lack of a better word, of the United States. And that's essentially where all of the workplace conduct stuff comes from, right? So very dry legalese.
So riveting.
Yeah, there is nothing exciting in here, but nonetheless, it'll be fun to discuss. But religious discrimination involves treating a person, frankly, either an applicant or an employee, which is an interesting caveat, unfavorably because of his or her religious beliefs. So the law protects not only people who belong to traditional organized religions, aka Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, etc., but also others who have, quote, sincerely held religious, ethical, or moral beliefs, which is in and of itself dicey already, right? Because where's the line there? And you and I talked about this kind of pre-show where essentially, and I think you framed it up well about your comments of why it's wrote the way it is and kind of what the goal is. You want to mention that real quick for the old audience?
Well, just laws in general typically will have somewhat of vague wording because they want the courts to be able to dictate which way they go with a lot of stuff. So I remember learning about that in school forever ago. So I think the one that we were talking about is, you have to take, as an employer, reasonable measures.
Yeah, we'll get there for sure. But
so it's stuff like that. Well, what's reasonable?
What does that even mean?
And things that aren't too expensive for them to do. Well, what's too expensive? Well, that's going to be very different from, say, a mom and pop shop or a, Fortune 50 company. Those are very different things. So all of that is left to somewhat for the courts to decide.
Yeah, so which is kind of frustrating and a little bit of bullshit when you think about it on the surface. Hey, why don't we just have a list of everything that and where it's wrong, how we do things, but it's almost impossible to do that anyways.
Humans don't work like that. And
we're always inventing new ways to harass people.
Correct.
Good for us.
Well, and I kind of saw that because I did a different kind of research. I went more for lawsuits. I was reading some of the lawsuits out there, and one of the things that I came across were, whether you agree with the sides or not, both sides were technically in the right. And so you just get to this point where it's like, well, shoot, what do you do? And it was interesting because even the Supreme Court was like, we're going to vote on this other thing, not the actual core issue, and throw it out because both sides were right.
And think about
under the laws.
Think about what that case had to do to even get to the Supreme Court.
So many.
It's got to be a lot of stuff.
Yeah. It had gone through multiple other lower courts.
So if you want to have, like, if you're ever really struggling with sleep, and you're laying in bed at night and you're thinking to yourself, the sheep thing ain't working for me. I've already tried my normal methods. And before you down a bottle of melatonin or NyQuil, you should try reading the Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, because whoa, right? But I do want to mention that because that is like the root genesis of where all these things come from. So everything having to do with with harassment is really under the Title 7, which is anything regarding employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So that's kind of the basis of it. And then
it only applies to employers with 15 or more employees.
And that's confusing because, for example, FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act that has to do with like reasonable accommodations and time off for sick family members and whatnot, that's only applicable to companies with 50 or more employees. So it's kind of funny where some of these things get a little goof.
The ADA is actually 15 employees as well. I'm reading it. If your business has fewer than 15, you're exempt for the law requiring to provide reasonable accommodations. But if your business provides public accommodation, your accommodations must be accessible under the ADA, regardless of your size.
I'm sure there's an easy example of public, but
like buses.
Maybe,
yeah. You have to be compliant no matter what.
Yeah. But nonetheless, that's the basis of it, right? So the Civil Rights Act back in 64 is kind of when all this stuff started. But here we go. So religious discrimination can also involve treating someone differently because that person is married to or associated with an individual of a particular religion. I found that interesting only in the sense that basically it doesn't even necessarily have to be like you may not be personally discriminated, but you're being treated differently in a weird sense because of your affiliation with somebody else, which is a little goofy. But I'm sure there's 80
But that's
examples
happened
of
1,000
this.
times.
Yeah,
Think about, back in the day when interracial marriages were like taboo, let's say a white woman was in the, workforce, but everyone knew she was married to a black man. Like they would treat her differently.
That's a really good example, actually. Yeah, no doubt about it. Obviously, anything having to do with LGBTQ is in the similar capacity. Mm-hmm. So we can keep going down the list here, but please jump in if you have like any examples, either A, you want to talk about, or B, that are relevant to what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So the religious discrimination in work situations. So the law forbids discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment. So here is stuff that I kind of found interesting. I guess I kind of knew this, but when you read it this way, it changes, at least in my brain, how I look at it. Firing, hiring, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, fringe benefits, or any other term or condition of employment. So it's not necessarily I don't even know the right terminology. You're in the either Hindu or Muslim faith and, you're wearing certain garb or you have a certain prayer rotation or whatever you want to call it. Like that is accurate, but it might just be simply that you were either not hired or let go, or you didn't get a raise, or
Correct.
You weren't given training or anything along those lines.
Well, and there was a lawsuit about this with actually Abercrombie and Fitch with a Muslim American woman, Samantha Eloff.
Did she not like cologne? Because if you don't like cologne, you're
Don't
screwed.
go to Abercrombie.
Right.
So she interviewed for a position and interviewed quite well, but she was wearing the hijab.
Oh yes, hijab.
Correct.
I believe. Yep.
She was wearing that during the interview. Never said anything about it, and Abercrombie and Fitch has like this company dress code.
You must show skin.
No hats, no headgear, like nothing on your head. And so they didn't hire her, even though she did really well in the interview.
Yeah.
And so she did start a lawsuit for it, and in the end did win, because it was like, one, even though she didn't say, hey, I need to wear this for religious reasons, it was something like the store owner or the manager or whatever.
Yeah. So while you're looking at it, you beat me to it, because I would assume that unless you have some type of comment or in writing something that was said, it very quickly turns into a he said, she said. So I'm wondering if this one had legs because a manager said something like...
He said it to the one that interviewed her, of like, well, if we can't hire her because she has to wear that. Originally, they went in favor of her. The court held that she did not have to explicitly request accommodation, from Title VII, which prohibits, religious discrimination in hiring. So she did end up winning. But initially,
was that a financial thing? Like, was she awarded damages, or it was more like the principle of the thing?
The lawsuit in a federal district court resulted in her receiving $20,000 in damages.
There you go.
Then it was later reversed by the 10th U.S. Circuit of Appeals, and then they went to the Supreme Court, in which they did side with her again. Yes. Which is interesting how different, like, the courts... It depends who you get.
Yeah. Which is why don't go in front of a judge unless you have to.
Seriously.
Not that I have any personal experience to share. Well, okay,
and that's what I'm just seeing in all these lawsuits that I looked up, of like, it basically went back and forth, and then they just kept going all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
and that's as far as you can go.
Yeah, so specifically under the EEOC thing, it talks about accommodation, dress, and grooming policies. This is the vague part, and then I'll read the part that gets more specific. Unless it would be an undue hardship on the employer's operation of its business, an employer must reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices. This applies not only to schedule changes or leave for religious observances, but also to things such as dress or grooming practices. These might include, for example, wearing particular head coverings or other religious dress, such as a Jewish yarmulke or a Muslim headscarf.
Correct.
Or wearing certain hairstyles or facial hair, such as, I swear to God this is in here, such as Rastafarian dreadlocks or Sikh uncut hair and beard, which I believe I think
it's Jewish men wear, I believe.
So it also includes that employees' observance of a religious prohibition against wearing certain garments, like you can't make an employee wear a miniskirt, for an example. When an employee or applicant needs a dress or grooming accommodation for religious reasons, he should notify the employer that he needs an accommodation for religious reasons. If the employer reasonably needs more information, the employer and the employee should engage in an interactive process to discuss the request. I can't prove
this. Well, they have to negotiate, basically.
But I'm willing to bet stories like that lawsuit probably impacted what the EEOC has on here. And I bet you some of those things have been updated.
That's what happens is that's why decisions, especially in the Supreme Court, are massively important, because they use those in the lower court saying, well, based on precedent has been set. Well, the difference, what like Abercrombie and Fitch would have had to do successfully to win, was to say that they could not allow her or anyone to wear anything outside the dress code because it would damage their brand, like their brand image. But you would have to like legitimately prove that, which you couldn't as in a store where you're just helping people.
Yeah, the only thing
like,
I
there's
could see
nothing wrong.
The only I feel like argument that would carry weight would be, I get it that, if we allow her this in that circumstance, then everybody else in theory could ask for it. Now you could draw the line going like, well, just because you like your hat doesn't mean it's related to a religious circumstance.
100%. It has to be related to a religion.
Right.
That you actually participate in. But you can't just be like,
but there's the gray part, right? Like that goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning. which I'm not seeing it just in my notes here, but basically what I referenced earlier, saying it's not okay. Here it is. It also others who have sincerely held religious, ethical, or moral beliefs. So then you get into the like, are you going to have some dipshit on your team try and say that, like my ethical and moral belief is that my head should be covered with my Minnesota Vikings hat? But
that would never stand in court.
It wouldn't carry water,
No.
but in the short term, I could understand how a manager would be like, okay, I have to respect this harassment part, but now I have to tell the other employee, like, dude, you know what I mean? Like, you're clearly trying to pull some bullshit on using a religious thing for the fact that you want to wear hats every day. So clearly not fun circumstances for anybody to deal with per se.
Yeah, and I would say that, I'd be shocked if that happened, like, because it's not a religious thing.
And then I'm from Pittsburgh, so why you'd be wearing a Vikings hat, I'm not really sure. But that's a discussion for another football related discussion here on the Hire and Fire podcast. Depending upon if my coach or Vikings coach gets fired, we might be able to have one of those types of discussions. So the other interesting component that I wanted to read about this is it keeps talking over and over and over again about quote unquote undue hardship. And that's the tough part, right? Like you don't really know what that means, but they try to describe it. An accommodation may cause undue hardship if it is costly, compromises workplace safety, decreases workplace efficiency, infringes on the rights of other employees, or requires other employees to do more than their share of potentially hazardous or burdensome work.
So I get the hazardous piece.
Of course.
Right? Because if you're working in like manufacturing, for sure, like you wouldn't be able to wear a scarf. Like now they could though let her wear it, but she would have to wear something over it, basically like a jumpsuit almost over everything, or tie it back or secure it.
That's true.
So that would be like reasonable accommodations. Like, hey, this isn't safe, but maybe we have an alternative of like, then you have to wear this over it so that you're safe.
Yeah. Or if you're a surgeon, but you that beard things comes into play. Well, then you just need a bigger face covering to get all of the hair tucked into whatever.
Well, and if you're a firefighter or anyone that has to wear, there's masks you have to put on that have
and
to
it won't seal and it won't seal exactly.
Then you can't, like, you literally can't. Then you either need to find a new profession or whatever.
Yeah. So this doesn't talk about it, but I'm just aware of these from other circumstances. Like there are places that get essentially relief of this, where first thought, you're running a religious school. And they are allowed to screen you based on your religious beliefs because it's integral and directly related to the mission of the school and what the students and parents are being told that the blah, blah, blah supports blank. So there can be times where an employer can say flat out, like, this is a part of employment. But you need to have a really niche scenario. Otherwise, you can't be forced to participate in a religious activity as a condition of employment per the EEOC.
So a little less technical, like when you think about the things that I've witnessed personally that have been kind of that I'm curious on your take. And for all the listeners too, just so you know, while we're discussing this, Jeremy and I are on different sides of the religion belief system.
Yeah.
So you are Catholic.
Yeah.
Not really anymore, but still you do
for years and years and years
and all that.
Yeah.
I would say that I am agnostic of like, I don't know if there is, but I really do not like religions.
And you're more agnostic about a belief in faith, but you're pretty clear on your personal thoughts on organized religion. That's kind of the dividing
I'm
line.
like on organized and meh. So like for instance, this was quite a few years ago, I was around someone who received a letter from their company saying that when their holiday party was.
Yeah.
Right? And he got super pissed that it was called a
It said holiday
holiday
instead of
party.
Christmas.
He goes, we have Christmas in this country. And I had to go like, no, we don't have a religion in this country. We're actually not even allowed to set one. It's in the fucking Constitution or whatever the laws are that they've put. Like, that was the whole basis of this country, was that you could get away from religious persecution.
And it literally comes from England, because the King of England was forcing Catholics to leave the Catholic faith and be a part of the Church of England. Or you get
killed.
Yeah.
I mean, you would get burned at the stake, all these things.
So obviously religious freedom is important, but the idea of the government saying this is our state religion, that
unacceptable.
So I think a lot of people get confused by the separation of church and state. It doesn't mean that they can't be interrelated. It just means that the government itself does not have a singularly sponsored religion, either that is forced on people or that it kind of says is the best.
Well, and we're not allowed to make laws based on a religion.
Right. And then if you go back to like Christmas being a national holiday, I don't really know what the genesis of that was. So I'd have to read up on that, frankly. Maybe I should put that in my notes, but it's probably something, if I was speculating with a reasonably educated guess, so many people aren't working that it was kind of we're going to name this a holiday because it's already a holiday without a name anyways.
Well, and I would imagine back then it was by far the predominant.
Yeah.
I was even reading an article that straight out said the number of lawsuits for religious discrimination in the past 5 to 10 years has gone way up because we're getting more diverse.
And we're significantly more litigious than we've ever been, unfortunately, but still true.
Well, we've always been litigious, but we're just getting more diverse. Whereas when the natural holiday of Christmas was, we weren't that diverse back then. So as you get more diverse, people have to, you're being forced to be not a dick. Yeah. They're just like, just stop being a dick.
Well, I like that example just because I've said that before too, frankly. But like, for example, my old company would send out holiday cards every single year, and they were intentionally, whatever you want to call it, happy holidays on purpose, right? So what I did for the most part was I'm supposed to be signing these cards for our, consultants. So if I was feeling it, I would write Merry Christmas personally, but the card itself said Happy Holidays. I think that's a freaking great, middle ground settling part where if you're trying to go to your employer and be like, screw you in this Happy Holidays bullshit, I want it to say Christmas. Well, that's where you've probably gone too far. But if you want to,
and you're missing the whole spirit of Christmas, Christianity, the whole thing.
Yeah, but if you want to personally say that instead of Happy Holidays, fire it up,
whatever.
But challenging the corporate stance is probably where you're fighting an uphill battle at the least.
However, if you are very aware of, let's say that there is a Muslim person in your office or Jewish person or whatever, and you routinely every morning go up to their desk and go, Merry Christmas, Susan, you will be found harassing, just, religious harassment, and that will be addressed. Like, that's part of that, is you cannot harass each other or your customers. Vendors cannot harass, contractors cannot harass your employees, all of it. Like, you guys just be nice.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, that's good advice. So have your opinion. It just doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the prevailing wisdom. And I think that's where the dick part comes in, because it's just a unflexible,
correct,
I'm right, you're wrong type scenario. I mean, I'm all
empathy. This country needs to learn empathy.
For you Seinfeld fans, I'm all for Festivus for the rest of us. So I think we can embrace that wholeheartedly, and it'd be very, very non-confrontational. So yeah, I mean, it's what I like about these laws is it just took us 30, 40, 50, 60 years to kind of get the prevailing thought process to be a little less rigid. And I mean, it sounds like there's a hell of a lot of lawsuits, but personally, from my perspective, even the staunch religious people, I think, have become a little bit more understanding that I have a lot of cool people around me, to your diversity point, that celebrate other stuff and cool. And a lot of them, frankly, are right around the same time, like it or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Obviously, Christmas for Christians is Christmas Day, but
Hanukkah kind of moves around.
That's an 8-day. Yeah.
Well, it moves around, I thought, too.
On the calendar itself, I don't remember the logistics there, but it's an 8-day thing that normally I think starts more mid-December.
That could be.
And then my girlfriend that I'm dating, she this is an interesting one. She comes from Russia, and in Russia, they celebrate the New Year as though it's a huge holiday. So they're basically in their home, they celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, but then they kind of re-celebrate almost like a Russian-based non-religious holiday of sorts. You know what I mean? So I don't think she would call that religious, but it's just yet another example of
we all celebrate different things.
People do different stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like most people don't know from a Christian perspective that Christmas starts on Christmas. It doesn't end when the sun sets. It's really an entire season and it goes for weeks. So the staunch Catholics out there, if they're listening, will be laughing because they're the ones instantly judging people who take their tree down the next day. What are you talking about? It just frickin' started. You know what I mean?
So it goes through the end of the year?
No, don't quote me, but it ends on, going off memory, it ends on what's called the Feast of Christ the King, which is, I believe, 3 Sundays later. So Christmas is, but Americans, we kind of, hell, if you go to Target in the middle of November, you're finding Christmas stuff. So Christmas, it feels in this country like Christmas starts in late November and then wraps up on the 25th, right? Literally, right? Yeah. But technically, that's not how the religious component goes. But anywho, so good old religious discrimination, very fun, very fun. So going to your point about teasing, though, that's what I was going to bring up as well. Obviously it's illegal to harass a person because of their religion. Harassment can include, for example, offensive remarks, blah blah blah. But here's the interesting part. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that aren't very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, which we talked about those already. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer, such as a client or a customer.
Right.
That shit gets spicy in a hurry. Where you have somebody who doesn't even work for your company as a client, like a paying client.
Correct.
But there's a harassment component there, which that's tough, right?
I read about that.
You did?
I read about that. They were saying that the steps you'd have to take were, one, they'd have to talk to the client, and then
verbal.
Yeah, and if that didn't work, then it was move them to a new
assign them,
reassign them. But you can't just, I've been told, not religious discrimination, but I've told when I had clients of just get over it. When they were harassing me and it was awful and it was just well, too bad. And it was what?
I know.
No.
And that's tough because a lot of salespeople, companies, etc., will do the customer's always right. And in that scenario, it just ain't true.
Right.
So, but this is fixable, to your point, right? You don't have to sit the client down and yell at them or threaten to boot them. You can just simply say, hey, we're going to reassign you because it's just easier for us to have somebody else take over, which frankly I think is a relatively easy discussion. Because if you have somebody saying this client's being an ass and here's how, my first thought would be okay, well, help me understand the circumstances. Do you want to keep working with this customer or not? Would you prefer me to confront them, for lack of a better word, or do you want to just reassign and then everybody moves on? If somebody wants us, to confront somebody, cool.
Well, and I think that's
don't
the
think
point.
that should be very hard.
I think the point is, for most of this, is once a company is anyone, like a manager, anyone's aware of this going on in any capacity, they must do something, even if it's just starting the conversation and like mediation or whatever. It's when it gets dicey and the liability starts to present itself is when they don't do something. So if your direct manager is aware but won't do anything, and then you leave or you file a complaint, even if HR wasn't aware, even if the CEO, no one was aware but this manager that was managing this person, the company is still liable.
Yeah, so note to self.
Yeah, like
if you're a manager,
don't brush this off.
Don't sweep it under the rug.
Seriously, like take this stuff seriously.
Even if it's frankly selfishly motivated where you don't want to get yourself in trouble, cool.
100%.
Just bring somebody else in and be like, hey, I don't know what the hell to do. If you have a sizable company that has a legit HR department, that's easy. If not, go to managers. If that's not doable, then maybe you just have to keep climbing the ladder.
All right, so there's one lawsuit that I really want to talk about.
Sweet.
This is I think everyone's heard about it, but this is the one where both sides were technically right, despite me hating listening to the one side.
Fair enough.
Oh, I couldn't get through it. It's the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission.
Making cakes
making the cake. This one.
What was the argument from the cake's perspective? Was the baker thinking this was cool for what reason? So
he is a staunch Catholic.
I vaguely remember this.
Right. And so he said that God would be angry, basically, if he made cakes for a gay couple for their wedding, and that his cakes were an artistic expression. So he was protected under free speech and religious discrimination, or free exercise of religion.
Okay, so they bought that, is what you're saying.
And so therefore he can be granted an exemption from laws ensuring non-discrimination in public accommodations, in part by refusing to provide creative services such as making a custom wedding cake for that couple.
Here's the part that pisses me off, but I haven't read enough about it, so I'm kind of, I guess, projecting something that might be false. What's their motivation?
Who?
The couple. Like, are you going after this person to nail them? Or do you live in a podunk town where they're the only baker? Like, are you doing this to get a cake and you just want a cake? Or is this like, fuck you, I'm going to bury you and I'm going to bankrupt you because I don't like your opinion? Did it go into that?
Let me flip it around and put it in a different perspective. If a interracial or Black couple walked in and was denied service because of their race, it would 100% go to the courts. Like, you can't do that.
I would agree.
Well, they are protected equally.
Agreed.
So it should absolutely go to the courts.
I don't have a problem with it going to the court. I'm just curious of what, like, if you injected the couple with true serum, are they doing it because, like, hey, we're just trying to be a happy couple here and get married? Or is it a very vindictive attack that we're trying to use you as a, whatever you want to call it, an example? What? And I don't know. I don't even know if anybody knows.
It just doesn't matter. Because it doesn't matter.
If I'm them and I walk in and that's what I hear, I'm like, F you, dude. Then I'm gladly going to another store. I'm assuming they intentionally chose not to do that and to fight the fight.
No, they had to. They had to go to another store. They had to.
Okay, but they sued
because it was wrong.
Right. So they were trying to make an example of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I would personally.
So the tough part on the religious component that I can kind of see is, I'm trying to word this correctly, from a religious perspective, black, white, purple, green, like that in and of itself is not a conflict. So I get what you're saying. I think there's logic there. Like gay, black, what's the difference?
Yeah, but it's
I think
also
from
still
his
it's also
perspective,
still cherry picking, because then what if someone came in and they were previously divorced? Technically then you shouldn't be serving them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So, or whatever if you're adopted or I don't know. There's a whole long list of like things that are not acceptable technically. Yeah. But these people typically cherry pick what they just don't understand. Therefore, they're afraid of it, and therefore they want it gone. And they hide behind religious freedom.
And I guarantee you people do that. I have no clue if that person or that baker or whatever you want to call it was doing that. I can understand.
Well, there's videos where you can listen to him talk.
Yuck. Okay.
It was gross.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it was gross.
The interesting component is I understand why it was both sides are right.
Correct.
Because I think their case does hold water where they're like, we have a documented, whatever you want to call it, belief, policy, I don't even know what the right word is, about this. So we're not making this up. We're not just choosing this couple to fight with. Like I can see how the court was like, no, what was the phrasing that I read earlier, that it was basically, I'm gonna see if I can find it quickly. Essentially, to the degree that their rights as Americans, whether you're gay, straight, or indifferent, should be protected. I understand that they, being the baker, have an argument where they're like, this is a legitimate religious thing.
Correct. Whether or not I agree with it, I want to go on record and go, but technically, I'm not saying he's in the wrong legally.
Yeah, you just personally disagree.
I just personally think he's a piece of shit. But technically and legally, with the way the law is written, he has at least a case to go after. But here's what happened. So it kind of went
in this circumstance.
So this is where they did not actually rule on what the core complaint was. So they didn't say who was right.
They used a technicality to get out of it.
Correct.
And then said no one's a loser, so everyone's a winner.
They punted is how they
well said.
They call it.
Well
is
said.
Basically they said, the Supreme Court said they were what's the word? They were kind of negatively I want to find the word. Here, you talk while I find the word.
Yeah, I'll give you. I'll give the group a topic to consider. A chickpea. It's neither a chick nor a pea. How do you feel about that? Rhode Island. It's neither a road nor an island.
Where's the word?
Yeah, no. I get your point. I get your point, because that is accurate. Like I don't think the Supreme Court was looking for a reason to do so, but I think they were clearly like they were struggling because they knew both sides had a argument, and none of them were easy to figure out.
Correct, because technically they could have been like we're tied, or there isn't a winner, but you always have to get something.
What was the name of the baker again?
I'd have to look. Hold on one second. So I found what it said. It said that they both agreed that the commission exhibited hostility towards Phillips' religious beliefs and concurred with the reversal. Basically, you have to stay religiously neutral, which the lower courts did not. They said.
Oh, so they
didn't stay neutral.
They basically blamed a lower circuit court.
Correct.
And threw it out because they screwed it up.
Correct. Now, had they stayed religiously neutral, they would have had the lower,
the judges,
the lower courts. Then they would have had to vote on the core issue but at this
And we
point,
don't know what would
we
have
have
happened there
no
anyways.
idea.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, there was a
Man, that's a lot of legal fees for nothing, huh?
Right. There was a flower lawsuit under the same thing where a woman did not want to do flowers.
Weddings again. Yep.
She lost because she went back and back and back, like literally all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court threw it out and was like, no, your flowers are not artistic expression. There was no
interesting. So based on that, if they were to rehear the case of the cake, it would probably go the same direction as the flowers.
Hard to say, but potentially.
But you can obviously call floral arrangements art, just like how you could call a fancy dancy wedding cake art.
Yeah.
I mean, I've baked cakes before, and it's not art. I mean, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, she had to make a public apology, donate $5,000 to a local LGBT youth center, and promise to no longer refuse service. And she basically, like, double birds, like, flipped off the court and said, I'm not doing that.
Come after me.
And she kept going to more lawsuits. And then at the end, she settled, paid him $5,000 and was like, I'm just going to retire.
God, this shit makes you drink. I mean, it really does.
Like, what? Just do your flowers. Like, sorry, but you're not being asked to go to the wedding. You're not condoning. You're literally, because you shouldn't have to hide the reason why you're coming in to buy something, but it also doesn't matter. Like, what if I was a third party and was like, I need these flowers for a wedding, and they're like, oh, who's the happy couple? And be like, doesn't matter. This is what they want. They even did this too. There was a cake, again, a cake thing where a young woman.
They'd be so complicated.
I know. Where this
Flour,
young woman.
Sugar, butter.
Was going through, I forget what it was, if it was going through the transition or if she was just non-binary. I don't remember. But she was a trans girl, I believe. Mm-hmm. And she wanted her cake to be pink on the inside and blue on the outside. And they refused
It's a good way to have steak, by the way. They call it black and blue.
they refused to make it because they're like, you can't choose your sex. Make the cake.
That's why I asked you what the name was, because if it was like Christian Bakery,
it was Masterpiece Cake
and
Shop.
That was why I asked. Like, that's stupid because it's the name of your company, but I almost feel like you have a little more on your side if you're advertising yourself as catering to blank.
Catering to the Catholics, to the devout Catholics.
I am a Christian baker, or whatever you want to call it.
Don't be divorced. Don't be gay.
And that's a really good point. This is not related to workplace or like lawsuits, but I've seen enough of that where good-meaning Catholics, Christians, insert whatever you want to call it, are trying to genuinely follow what they believe is right? Like, this is literally, in the words of this thing, a sincerely held religious belief.
Oh,
right?
I believe that.
So that's true.
Yes, 100%.
That's true. But
100%.
But the I've seen that a lot. But it's almost impossible to not find that same person being hypocritical.
Yes.
And that's your point about the divorce thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And that in and of itself, I think, is a really good point. So I don't know how courts would rule on that. Like, hey, do you or do you not have proof that you've rejected another customer because of blank? Does that even matter? Does that make you look better or worse?
I feel like that would be my argument if I was going in and be like, then you need to consistently follow everything.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get to cherry pick based on, you just don't like gay people.
Yeah. Now, I don't, okay, we're talking hypotheticals now, but
yeah.
Like if you lawyer up and you're talking to somebody who gets the legal side of this and you're like, I want to build this cake business specifically targeting so-and-so. Frankly, not even expecting to have a conflict with somebody that doesn't fit that group, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just say I'm a wedding planner and I do that for people that are from African descent. I don't care.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you semi-advertise that, you have a little more on your side. But if you're,
I'd be curious what the law
I
is
don't know.
about that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you're,
like, can you
but if I run,
only...
if I run a t-shirt store, does that mean that I have to call it a Christian t-shirt store? Or so like let's go with that. I had a friend who worked for a Christian bookstore. Do they have to, like, if somebody came in and said, I'm looking for a book on Islam, like, does that store have to carry it? No. But is that because it's defined?
But they could, you have to let them purchase, even if it's a Bible.
Yeah.
What if it's a gift? Like, what if it's whatever?
I totally get that. Yeah.
So, like, same thing.
But my point is like, is it...
You don't have to carry... No, you don't...
knowing what they know now, if you were going to start a bakery, could you intentionally utilize these cases and have words on your website or on your flyer that specifically says, we cater to blank? And does that help your cause or hurt your cause?
Right.
Because does it help you because it allows you to have a niche, or does it hurt you because you're so clearly saying, I only do this shit for certain people? Because I could see it both ways.
Now, I will say that the gentleman, what was his name? Jack Phillips. So Jack did respond to them that they were welcome to take any of the pre-made, like, standard stock cakes or anything else, but just he was not going to make them a custom cake.
That's a little weird. What's the difference there?
That's the artistic of, like, he personally, but, like...
So that might have been his unintentional saving grace. Because I bet he, pardon the pun, I don't think he, if I'm assuming that's true, I'm willing to bet he didn't do that on purpose.
No, which will say, like, okay, so he's not refusing service. He's refusing his custom cakes, which he views as his art, which he only wants to do for people that fit within his belief system.
Right.
But they are welcome. Anyone's welcome to purchase anything from that's already in the store.
Yeah. Well, for his sake, thank God he said that, because that's probably the only thing that kind of helped them, per se. Yeah, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. That is a really good one. So obviously, if courts are needed, courts are needed. From my own personal life experience, I really want to avoid having a judge have authority to make decisions on my behalf that are now legally binding. So I'm with you. I'm mediating the shit out of that thing to see what I can do. And if I'm that baker, it's more of the principle of the thing. But I bet you if he had it to do over again, he would have just said, I'll just have my associate make it for you. And then I'm just not going to personally. But I can easily see how he's thinking, whether my junior baker does it or I do it, it's still got my company stamped on it. So I kind of get that. But
so with the stuff in that was pre-made.
Okay, that's my point. That's a good point, because on that level,
it's just not consistent.
On that level, it actually seems reasonable-ish. But you almost figure, well, if you don't want gay people getting married, then you
should get out of the cake business.
You probably don't want them buying stock cakes either.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be in the cake business.
Yeah. And I can almost
cakes and flowers.
And I can almost picture the, like, behind the scenes conversation, right? Like, Catholic baker talks to Catholic buddy, talks to Catholic priest, and they feel like they have a hill that they are willing to die on. Ipso facto, the couple has the same hill. You get from the other side of the angle.
Well, just imagine. It's the happiest, like, you're so excited. You finally got the ability to get married, which was a big fight in itself. You find someone you want to spend your life with. You're doing this. You go in, and then someone is like, I don't agree with your life. Yeah. And it just... How shitty.
I totally agree. I don't disagree with the emotional side of it. That's why...
They didn't ask you to come, like, videotape their bedroom experience.
Right.
Make them a cake.
But that's where it's an interesting... That's why I brought up what I did at the beginning, where I'm like, okay, I don't know how the court thinks about this stuff, but, obviously the couple decided this was a hill worthy of dying on.
Absolutely.
And they just as easily could have said, I'm just going to another baker, screw you.
Which they did have to do.
But nonetheless, they wanted to do it. And unfortunately, frankly, to a certain extent, everybody lost because the only buddy who won in this circumstance is the lawyers collecting fees. I mean, it's really that simple because there was no decision made. I don't think there was a precedent set outside of the artistic component. But then the artistic component didn't work for Flower Girl.
Yeah, so that's,
why not?
That's the thing is it did set a precedent, but it only helped certain people, like, because with the stuff that I read, lots of people did like go back to the courts or note this particular case, because even the flower one did, but they were like, no, like hands down, no, this is not. She lost. Now the part that's the part that not even about this, like if we move away from like lawsuits, just thinking about.
Do you want to stick with cakes?
Just in the office.
Buttercream's better than the sour cream or the whatever. But did I derail us?
Buttercream versus cream cheese.
Yeah.
I love buttercream. Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
The cakes in general are
I
really
love
good.
cake. Dude, I had a cake over New Year's.
Cake's delicious.
Cake is so good.
I bought some filled cupcakes from Target. And so I was looking at a vanilla, chocolate, and red velvet, and I just got all three of them. So, So anyways, if you move away from whatever, if you even remember what you were talking about.
Now I just think about cake. So things, personally, I was trying to think of like situations just in the workplace. So if we get away from like the litigious stuff, just like in the office, I had a situation here actually where I felt a little guilty about what I said, because I think it upset that person, but I'm not sure. So we were, like I said to earlier in the show, I am not religious by any means. I say, oh my God. My son says, oh my God, all this stuff. And I don't really care. Like, I don't care.
Right.
However, I do, if you think with empathy and try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, I did realize that despite the fact that I don't care, there are people that do. And it's a very simple thing to change, to say, oh my gosh. So I literally had to go to my son and be like, but it's really okay that you say that, but it's probably not very nice to people who don't like that, where that means something to them. And all I did was ask him, I was like, can you just say, oh my gosh, instead? Not a problem.
Yeah.
Completely changed.
Yeah.
He didn't even think twice about it. Now he says, oh my gosh. And I was like, no, I don't care. I don't. But in the effort to practice what I preach, pun intended, that's something simple that I can do to not offend someone. Because when Chad worked here, he's very religious. I had said that, like, oh God, I don't care if I'm saying it now. I don't care. Oh God.
Yeah.
I don't care if my son says, oh my God, like who cares?
Did he call you out?
No, but I could see him kind of stiffen a little bit and kind of shift. And because I was like, oh my God, we did not do one religious thing with my son, not one, because neither Eric or I care about that.
Neither. No, there's a debate. Go ahead.
I think I say both. But it was just, I noticed his shift. And so I was like, okay, I don't have to be a dick. So I'll just change that behavior. So but not everyone will think that way. So that could have easily been a mediation you would have had to deal with if he was upset by that, of like, hey, Amanda, you're upset with him. And, so those are the kind of conflicts that on a daily basis that we would have to address we get bigger, or as we have more different types of people. And
that's where I think, and I read it before, but it bears repeating now. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that aren't very serious, Harassment is illegal when it is so frequent and severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment. So
if I said death to God and had a sign on my door right behind him, knowing it would bug him, that's harassment.
Now we have a wee bit of a hostile environment.
Correct.
Right. But obviously, even if you said, oh my God, and an employee came into my office and challenged me on it, honestly, I don't know what I would do or say. Like, I mean, I could speculate, but technically, according to this, I could basically just, say, hey, a comment here or there is not rude, wrong. They don't deserve corrective action, repercussions. But hey, if it matters to you, then find your own way to talk to him or her being you in this circumstance, where it's like, hey, can you just not, please? If you said fuck you, I'm going to say God as many times as I want. Now we might be getting to what you could maybe call a hostile or whatever.
So what happens when you have like really devout religious people? Maybe it's most of your company, but you have a few like atheists, let's say, and you've got like everyone kind of preaching of like, this is the way it should be.
Oh, the opposite. So you have religion pushed on an atheist per se?
Correct. I believe that is also protected of like,
well,
but I don't know.
I think the answer is yes, because of what I read earlier, which is Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, yes, but also others who have sincerely held religious, ethical, or moral beliefs. I think that's applicable there.
Sure.
Where, there is no sect of religion that is referred to as atheists. They would laugh at that because they are clearly the opposite.
Because they're not organized.
Yeah, well, atheists, a lot of atheists know this, but plenty don't, where a lot of people who would claim to be atheists are truly agnostic. Sure. They just literally use the words as synonymous.
Which they are not.
But there is no organized blank of atheists, even though there's groups and societies and whatnot. But I mean, if a atheist person is literally being like, I'm being like judged, talked down to, where someone's like, hey, where are you going to church on Christmas? And
why do you get it off?
Going? You're not. What's wrong with you?
How come you celebrate Christmas? You're an atheist. And like, really, like, I'm not going to get you a present if we're doing, you can't be part of Secret Santa and you can't. Like,
one of my favorite guys on a radio show I listen to is definitely an atheist, and he would own that. But he'll be the first to admit, like, I'm not celebrating Christmas because I give two shits of any kind about God, Jesus, etc. Like, this is a fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the right word.
It's a cultural thing at this point.
A cultural family tradition of whatever you want to call it.
Correct.
So I hear you. I guess if I was in that spot as a manager, you do what I think would be the right thing. Hear out both sides. Figure out who offended who, ask either the person to amend behavior or talk to the other person, and then let it go. And then if it rears its head again, then now you're in this like, all right, we got a little bit of a repetitive scenario going here.
Yeah.
And it's become problematic or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I could see that even with like the less respected religions, like Scientology.
Yeah.
I'm watching the docuseries on that.
Yeah.
Like, I could totally see that, a person being ostracized or teased.
If they're not a part of it?
No, if they're like, if you're in a Catholic, predominantly Catholic or whatever Christian group, and all of a sudden a Scientologist walks in, they're just going to be like, pfft. Like I could easily see that, even though it is a little insane, but it is technically a protected religion.
Yeah. So that's where it's communication, reasonable responses, like, do you or do you not understand that you're bothering another person? Like, even if you believe this, like, there's a difference between like, hey, this really matters to me, and I really believe in my faith, and I would love to be able to talk to you about it if you were interested. So let me know. Like, that's one thing compared to how fucking dare you not participate in this. Like, one thing I don't know that I'm making a note of is what's my responsibility as an employer regarding religious holidays associated with things that aren't days off. I don't know. Is it what's the right word? Is it accurate to say, of course you can have that day off, but you need to use a vacation day? I think so. I don't know.
I would have to read up on that.
So
yeah.
Good news, we have a notes section.
Yay.
Nothing makes better radio than hearing people type and not talk.
Sorry, guys.
It's on me.
Yeah, I'm reading like what is reasonable accommodation. I don't know. And what if your religious beliefs come into conflict with another person's rights? Yeah, I find this very interesting just because it's one, I don't understand it. I don't understand these strong beliefs. I just don't, but I understand why they should be protected.
The strong beliefs really, from my experience, from a religious perspective, come from, I want to word it right. They come from a belief that this is eternally impactful.
Right, but that's only because you were born into that family. If you were born, born into,
I hear you.
You know what I mean?
If you were born in Zimbabwe, then you might have a different opinion. I totally agree. But I know,
and that's what people.
I know that people literally short circuit that are very religious because they believe that their eternal soul has it could be in jeopardy I can't think of a better way to word it. It could be in jeopardy if you're intentionally going against what you believe is God's laws.
Even though, yeah, like.
So like for you, it's like, dude, I'm not willing to like even tease this. So I get that. Like if Baker guy truly in his soul,
yeah,
like 100% passing lie detector tests is like, man,
I'm not being
a dick here. Yeah, like yeah. I'm not being like you're a bad person. I'm literally being like I have a moral obligation to like there's certain things I just don't participate in.
Correct.
To the degree that I don't look at porn is to the degree that I don't make cakes for gay people. Mm-hmm. And if that makes sense in their head, that there's logic there. Mm-hmm. You may not get it. Frankly, a lot of people may not get it, but there's truth to that. That's why I kind of argued at the beginning. I'm like, who's doing what maliciously here? Like something feels.
But you still can't discriminate other people.
Yes.
Because of that.
Yes.
You know? So, yeah.
Right. So, like, I bet you if Baker guy, and I wasn't there, neither were you.
No.
If Baker guy on the initial intake meeting sees gay couple in front of him and just says, like, hey, I don't want to make this weird. It's just a tough spot for me. So what can I do? Like, can I introduce you to a few of my cake buddies? Can I give you a $250 voucher as a good faith gesture that you can go use this at my buddy's bakery? And that way I don't feel like I'm doing something immoral and you don't feel like you're being treated like dirt. I'm willing to bet that tact probably would have worked pretty well. Probably.
Depends. Because you never know. You know, right. Some people will not be reasonable.
Even if they should be.
On both sides. On either side.
100%. Yeah.
Either side, where you're like, okay, you're not even being reasonable at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a tough deal. There's courts for a reason, but it's a shame that these situations have to go there. But man, in the workplace, it's a little bit more clear, in my opinion, at least, because there's a friggin' hierarchy. You as a manager will get involved when there's a conflict between employees, or even if it's a hierarchical problem. That makes sense to me, but I don't know. I mean,
there's plenty of gray areas.
I feel like people who feel that they've been judged, what's the right word I'm looking for here? Oppressed, demeaned, whatever.
Disrespected.
Disrespect is another good one. I think a lot of that starts the problem. And then eventually it's I'm going to outwill you. No, I'm going to outwill you. And that's unfortunate. But who the hell knows? I mean, neither one of us are in the minds of the gay couple or Baker guy. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know. But man, But I get it to the degree that logically you're like, okay, you're making cakes for people. You're not going, you would like to think you're not going to be eternally judged because you did your business making a cake for somebody. But if you really, really, really feel like this is impacting your religious ability to, like, whatever you want to call it, your soul, you're going to hell, like you said, which is frankly where it comes from, then all right, what's your tact here? This is coming from a person who sucked at tact for 80% of my life. So I'm 100% getting that. Like, if I was in those situations, I don't even know if I would handle it correctly. But I mean, this is a stupid example, but Pirate Consulting was named after a faith-based component, and I did it on purpose. I wanted something being integrated, but I didn't want to call this Catholic staffing. Right. So like, I wanted to find something that
it would have never gone anywhere.
Right. So but even if it did, I wanted to make something for me that meant something, but it was not like overtly loud, aggressive, in your face, where either clients or prospective employees would either not want to be here or certain people would really want to be here. And I'm like, well, so for me,
I was careful if you're attracting fanatics.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, how can I do something that means something to me that isn't really
in your face?
There's no line in the sand here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's frankly, there's more people going, how the hell do you pronounce Pyra, as opposed to what the hell does that mean? So,
well, and I've had that. I've had clients where when, at the bottom of their website in the footer is like a paragraph of religious like quotes and all the stuff. And I was just like, this just doesn't belong in business. Like you can have your beliefs, but like, this, you're alienating. It wasn't even a religious product or service. It was just, this guy is devout.
And everybody can twist it. This is the stupidest example of all time, and I don't know why it jumped into my head. Have you ever seen a movie called Django Unchained?
No. It's
a Quentin Tarantino movie. It's really good. I highly recommend it. A little gory, but it's set 2 or 3 years prior to the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's, what is that, 1850s-ish, whatever you want to call it?
I should know, but I don't.
We'll just call it mid-1800s.
Okay.
And there are very, very aggressive racist people. Like the N word is used so often, like, but it contextually is accurate. So like,
for the time,
you can watch it, but there's a part of the movie where a guy is working on a slave plantation and he's whipping people and he's reading things from the Bible, talking about how essentially man, and by man it means just human race, will have dominion over the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, etc. But he was using that, implying that black people are beasts.
Right.
So, AKA, they're
twisting.
I have the ability to dominate you. Like, that's God's whatever. So,
well, that's the justification.
Yeah. So there's plenty of people that twist shit, and there's an equal number, maybe even greater number of people that are like really trying to do shit the right way. So obviously,
and I guess that's the part where it's like using your religion to discriminate, ostracize, demean anyone. I just have no patience for. Like that's, you're not even doing it right. Like, if you want to follow, like I said earlier, then you have to follow it if you're going to be that ostracizing and that personally awful to someone, of like, no, I'm not going to bake a cake for you. Well, then, okay, you're cherry picking what you're taking from the Bible. Then if you're going to follow the whole thing, follow the whole thing.
Yeah, but even if you do follow the whole thing, it's up for interpretation is the problem, per se. But like,
I've said this before to someone where I'm like, I will respect someone's beliefs as long as they don't infringe upon another person's like livelihood, personal, like you can't be oppressive with your beliefs. If that's the case, like, you can go in the corner and believe it, but you don't get to act upon those things.
Well, this is related to the entire topic of sex, religion, and politics in the workplace. But in my old company, they were really, really just generically, I'll just use the word progressive in the sense that that was kind of their style. And it was an interesting spot for me where we would have minority, I'm not using the right terms, but I'll do my best, minorities in business groups.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen is that we would be there would be a potluck or even just a meeting. So let's avoid the food. There's just a meeting in the conference room. And the only people that are invited are people that are either gay, not white. And it was weird because the only people that were invited to the diversity in the workplace were either Asian people, black people,
So all non-white.
all non-whites. So there would be moments where I'm in our main office, we called it the pit, and literally the only people still working at their desks are the white dudes. So it sucked because...
Well, it sucks because that's also going to then...
It feels like we're being excluded. So it actually demotivates the people that are in the majority from having any sympathy, for lack of a better word, towards the minority because we're actively being...
Well, they can't have sympathy. They can have empathy.
Okay,
yes.
all right. Debating the two of those, of course. But it kind of sucked in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now... What do? Do you just invite
Why
everybody?
Why wouldn't you invite everybody?
I think
the inclusion piece.
But no. And I would go to sales meetings and we were a big company. So we would take over giant hotels.
Yeah.
And they would have separate breakouts in separate ballrooms.
Okay. Here's
and those are tough because the minorities should be able to have we're a group. But unfortunately, the white dudes are kind of experiencing so I don't get to go because
they get a taste of what everyone else feels.
But all the females are included, minority. All the non-whites are included, minority. All the gay people are included, minority. So it's like I'm totally fine with the fact that you want to have your own thing, but you having your own thing, the way you're doing it is intentionally excluding us, which sucks. So you're sitting here going okay.
Go ahead.
But okay, so I know where you're going to go, but from my perspective, I'm sitting here going okay, well, I don't even necessarily want to be in there. I'm just telling you from sitting at my desk, it doesn't really feel inclusive, feels pretty fucking exclusive. So even if that logically makes sense, I think I would argue that you're being counterproductive with the main group that you would like to entice to be a wee bit more open to your differences.
2 points.
And that's tough.
So 2 points. First, especially with the breakout sessions and stuff, there is a tendency for white males to overtake those kind of settings. So you need a safe space for them for everyone else, for literally everyone else to have a voice.
And that's the logical reason to not include.
100%.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree.
The second piece is, and this is kind of the woman in me of oh, you finally got to feel what they always feel.
Yes, but
it's the one instance.
But you better be fucking careful because if you become the majority, shit's flipped. And can you imagine what it would have sounded like if I had a white men in business meeting?
They have them all the time.
No, I mean a documented white men in business meeting. We are excluding all women, all minorities of other races, and all gay people. That in and of itself is what are you doing? But when it's on the flip side, because you're in the minority status, it's understandable.
It is.
But my only argument is I would say it's being counterproductive to what your end goal is, which is if we had a magic wand, none of this shit would matter. So if everybody had a magic wand, it would be completely irrelevant, right? So even though there are reasons, logical and benefits to excluding people because you need a safe space or whatever you want to call it, then cool. But if you've put the shoe on the other foot, then you don't want that. So I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing out an example of
so initially,
it's tough. It's just tough to handle.
Initially, when you brought it up, I was on your side of that's counterproductive. That doesn't make sense. Inclusion, have everyone. But the longer I'm sitting here thinking about it, I actually agree with what they did.
Again, there's logic to it. I'm
Yeah.
just telling you what it feels like to be that. So
Yes, you were experiencing
but you don't want that. Your way to get equality in the sexes and gay, straight, and black, white, green, purple, the goal to get that is to eliminate that from your conscience.
Eventually.
You know what I mean?
Like that's the goal. But
So-
but at some point you need to have like, hey, you guys literally ran the world for the last like thousands of years. Like, we're gonna have a lunch.
Well, no, 100%.
Like,
that I get, but and I get your point. I really do. Even though I'm not in your group or whatever you want to call it, right? Like I'm a guy and I'm not a girl. In that example. So, but it's challenging because if assuming men specifically have done that shit in the past, the way to level the playing field so that there's not people being discriminated is not to just do it back to the other one. You know what I mean? Like if you have a group of people being oppressed for X number of for X time, the solution is not to flip it and then fuck over the other group that has been the oppressor. At a minimum,
but don't you have lots of meetings that were everyone, and you have?
Oh, of course.
Okay, then I still don't agree with you.
Well, that's fine. We're allowed to disagree
because it's not like they do 100% of their events that way. They're just saying, hey, you don't get to be in everything anymore.
Well, and I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with
like
that
either. That's the white male coming out of like, well, I should be a part of everything.
No, actually, it's not because I didn't want to be in there. I would have.
You just don't like being excluded.
If somebody would have said to me like, does this bother you? I would have been like, well, not really. I have a job to do, and I like missing as many meetings as possible. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not volunteering to go sit in a conference room if I don't have to. But at the same time, it's like, well, I guess I keep repeating myself, so I'll just have to say it and be done and not repeat it again. Where it's just like it's. For the people, for lack of a better word, that if you could change, it's just counterproductive for some of those. But it's a weird spot. So if
I would agree if they did all of the meetings,
well,
that
clearly,
way, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
well,
clearly.
that's not helping.
But again,
if
I had a once a quarter white men in business meeting.
Yeah, again,
that ain't
you
working.
guys did it for thousands of years.
Right.
You had those. You had them for thousands of years.
So at what point do we call it square?
Not for
After
a long
1,000?
time.
So
like,
now
we have a lot of when it's equal.
Yeah.
Like when we have a distribution in all of our businesses that are the distribution of the actual population. So like 50% of the population is female. So
right.
All of the governments and the businesses, the CEOs, the everything should be 50%. And it's not because women are not capable. It's literally, we're getting off topic. Like,
No. It's all on this. That's why I mentioned at the beginning. Like this is all on the entire sex, religion, politics.
So like
in the
you
workplace.
can't be like, well, we're good. We got 15% of women into Congress. Like, well, no, because we're not represented.
Yeah.
We're not represented. We are half the population. So then when you look at the different religions.
51 in fact.
Yeah, I know. We should be running this bitch. So if you've got different religions, you've got different races, you've got all this different stuff. Like that needs to be represented in government,
totally get it.
Business, all of that stuff.
But the byproduct of that sucks because I've watched companies that I've worked for overly promote women, and I've personally talked to those women that have been promoted, and they kind of hate the fact that whether they like it or not, and you can't prove a number, but they know part of the reason why they got that job or got that promotion or whatever you want to call it was because they have a vagina.
Fucking A,
and
yeah.
No, but most of those women don't want that.
If I'm up against an equal opponent.
That's what I mean. They want it on merit based.
If I am equally, like, side by side, we are both, if you and I went for a job and we are equally qualified, you better believe I better get it.
But that's not not necessarily what I'm arguing. My point is I want to frame it right.
And not me personally, everyone.
Well,
I'm fine, but I just mean women. I had this argument with my dad once.
But I've seen women that don't like the fact that they know that whatever percent, 130,
well,
80.
That's their prerogative. They probably haven't had a lot of barriers personally.
I don't know.
But it's not about, that's the point. It's not about them. We need to get equal representation through all the ranks of all the things. So like I had this argument with my dad So I had this argument with my dad once about how, he lost a job once because of equal opportunity and how wrong that was. And I go, okay.
Oh, like he was laid off?
He was literally, he went head to head with someone else. And that person got the job and he didn't, even though he was qualified, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, it's because of the equal opportunity. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, here's the difference. If you didn't get the job, did you get another job right after that? He was like, well, yeah.
Probably. Right.
I go, that man, very likely, this was his opportunity.
Woman, you mean?
No, it was a
gay thing.
No,
or a black
race
guy,
thing.
Or
Yeah, it was a race thing.
Yeah.
For him, it was a race thing.
I thought we were still on the male-female thing. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, it's all equal opportunity. So male, female, whatever, race.
Yeah, I just derailed on your pronoun for a second. Go ahead.
So so I was like, but that very likely was his one opportunity. And he goes, well, yeah, I got a job right after that. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't hard. Right. I go, you can't tell me in this small town where where he lives, that if someone named
Podunk, Minnesota,
named Muhammad or
insert whatever,
applied, that you guys wouldn't immediately reject him. Like that's what you don't understand is like you personally can go anywhere and they'll be like, oh, yep, this is a Joe Blow from the Midwest and he's probably white and not that people care about that anymore, but it was just. I was like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
it is not the same. They have so fewer opportunities. I personally have been told to laugh less, to be more serious, to grow up, to do all this stuff that had nothing to do with my ability. I could have easily done that job, but women were definitely discriminated against with this company. And that's why I left. I started my own business with Eric and we did, but
I love this topic and we have to wrap it up, but to continue to discuss this though, I love the idea that, how do I word it? Like I get your point about your dad, obviously that's a non-issue. It's a weird, not easy, there's no math to it. It's tough to understand about where things are going, why, what companies believe what, how do you know whether or not you're being discriminated upon? For example, I'll talk to people, I'm in the staffing business, where Pyra Consulting. So I've talked to people, let's just call it 50 or older, and they'll say things like, age discrimination. Like, am I arguable? Like, I've had people genuinely ask me, like, am I going to struggle because I'm at the whatever you want to call it, twilight of my career?
Correct.
And I tell them the truth. I go, discrimination's live and well, in bad ways and in understandable ways. And we will have clients say to us, thank you for submitting this candidate, insert cliche name, John Smith here, but every single person on our 17-person team is Indian. So I don't think the white guy is probably going to fit very well. I've seen the opposite, where it's a bunch of 25-year-old drinkers and 50-year-old dude is deemed not going to fit within the culture. I've seen the opposite, where everybody on the group is 55, 60 years old and bringing in a young whippersnapper will get rejected.
Which I don't agree with.
I don't agree with either, but it's a dynamic that's true.
I had that at my last job. I wanted to hire an older woman, and I had a very young team. And the owner was like, "Do you think she's going to fit in?"
It's a culture clash.
It's a culture. Right. She fit in great.
Right.
It was a great diversity thing of like, well, now we have a different perspective, not just all these kids.
And I agree, but the funny thing is we're a staffing business and we can't put this in job postings, but you'd be shocked how many times clients will say to us things along the lines of like, it could be anything. We really want a woman. Like, we will hire 50% of the job responsibilities or experience if we can get a female, or
because they need to push that in the industry.
But we can't put that on a job description. So, and you can't say that out loud, even if it's hiring a minority. So it's the unwritten, we know it's happening, and it could be happening for a good reason, but it still kind of sucks that it's like this. We're either not bringing in an older person because the team's young. We're not bringing in a younger person because the team's old. We're not bringing in an American because the team's Indian. You get the idea. But so here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to talk about this because apparently we did not settle it in 1 hour and 25 minutes. So we have a few topics for sexual harassment and religion harassment that we have for follow-up. So we're building a list for episode number 4. We're going to come back next time going into politics. So we're going to go politics next time, which is
could get heated.
Even more challenging because I haven't done any research, but I'm willing to bet that it's a little bit more vague. Right.
This might just more
it's not
be
male, female.
Because it's not a protected thing.
Correct.
This is just going to be more of like our experiences.
Yes.
What do you do?
Yes.
What do you think is acceptable?
And I've run into that situation with Pyra already about like hiring a group of people that are similar in one area. And I've even looked at you and have been like, I swear to God, this never came up in an interview. Why do people keep coming in that have a similar blank? Whatever you want to call it. So we'll get into that. We'll do some research on it, and we're going to go politics in the workplace, and we're going to talk about masks and I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Oh God.
But nonetheless, episode number 4 will be the follow-up, and obviously feedback. If you want us to talk about something, if you have a question about any one of these 3 areas of sex, religion, and politics that we haven't covered, please. Super thankful to Amanda for this episode because it just worked out well that you had some examples and I kind of went more on the factual side, which was cool. But hit us up on LinkedIn or our website or whatever. We'll post this with show notes, etc. And we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Hire and Fire podcast brought to you by Pirate Consulting. Please check us out online via LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at our website, pirateconsulting.com. That's PIRA consulting.com.